All right, welcome to day 2 of review week 1. We are going to get started with content and kind of get going because the faster we start, the faster this ends, which is just the best news. Just kidding. Hi, welcome for all of you. It's nice seeing your shining faces. So I have a couple of things I want to get going ahead, and then we're going to focus on focus on some content and kind of get going that way. So first thing I want to address is what everyone should be doing this weekend. So we are on Friday. This is your AP Psych Review 1 syllabus that you all got yesterday and we went over closely. I'm just kind of pulling it up so you guys can see. So today is Friday, of course. Today you have a vocab quiz for week 2. Some of you have already completed it and I've had no problem so far. If you see a problem, please let me know. Today in class we're going over research. Now, for homework this weekend, you really don't have anything except to be doing your Barron's book. You only have 2 real assignments going on in review, whether we were together. If we were together in school like normal, you'd have a do now. Ooh. You'd have a do now, you would have your vocab, you would have your Barron's book, and you have a test. So now you only have 3 assignments. Vocab, Barron's book, and test. So over the weekend, you should be working on that Barron's book because it is going to take you way longer than you think it's going to take. So you are responsible for pages 47 to 98. So this weekend, please, 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 please make sure you are working on your Barron's book. I cannot stress that enough. So today you have a vocab quiz due. It opened at midnight. Some of you actually took it at midnight because I was awake and on Edsby and you guys were filling it in. On Monday, you of course have week 3. And on Tuesday, you have week 5. So please make sure you are following along with your weekly schedule to make sure you know exactly what's happening. So it's not that you don't have homework. You just have a daily quiz, and then you should be maintaining and working on your Barron's book. Any questions on what you should be doing this weekend? Thumbs up if everyone's good. Perfect. All right. So today we're working on research, and that's where I'm going to focus pretty much all of my time. So yesterday after our class, I finally pulled out all of my stuff. I have my big binder of all my AP Psych stuff over here. I have all the stuff I've handed you, so now I'm like officially ready to go. So one of the things I referenced yesterday is so if you look at our little sheet that I was just looking at, it tells you what weeks of content all this stuff is in, week 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So what I've done is I've opened it up. I've opened up my resources to week 1, and from that resource from week 1, I have pulled out what I was talking to you yesterday of that flow chart of assignments and stuff like that. So you should have this little flow chart. And if you don't have it, you're more than welcome to take a picture of mine so you have it. But we completed this in week 1. So, of course, I was trying to be lazy and not take it on my paper protector, but here we are. So if you don't have this from your week 1 notes, I would take a photo of it, but you should have it because we completed it together. Okay, so this is just the flow chart of everything we kind of talked about yesterday, and I referenced it. So if you don't have it, you are more than welcome to take a photo of it. I'm going to scroll up here in a second. I should zoom in a little bit to make it easier to see, and then I'll scroll up. So this is your flow chart of psychology and its perspectives. We made it during week 1, but these are the types of resources that you should have and you should be looking at because we're not trying to redo everything. This is, if you don't have this, I would take a photo of the bottom. I just showed you the top. Now you have the bottom. We're not redoing everything. We've already put in a lot of work here, people. So because we've already put in the work, we should be relying on ourselves. So making sure that we are using the resources that we've already created for ourselves. That was the whole point of us working as hard as we have all year. So When I say and I point out that we have content from these weeks on the top of your assignments, so when I'm saying that we have all of this week's content is found in week 1, week 2, 3, 4, and 5, you should be opening your stuff and looking at week 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and you should be adding to that information. No one should just be sitting there taking like straight up notebook notes because we've already done the work. That should make you happy hearing that you don't have to, we're not learning this content again. We're just going through the content again. Now, with that being said, there is a couple of things that I do want to point out that I did give you that I didn't really get to go over because we were transitioning super, super quick because, you know, Corona and all that stuff. So one of the things that I gave you that we didn't really get to address before break, because when I had you pick up all of your assignments, you know how that day you came in and you picked up like 400 different things and like 10,000 sheets of paper and all that stuff. One of those assignments that I gave you refers to yesterday. So if you look and open up your note, look at the stuff I gave you right before we left for spring break, you'll see this sheet, which is all of your perspectives that I gave you. It's one of the many sheets you got on that big, massive day. And it kind of breaks down everything because nothing that I'm doing in these videos should be brand new to you, and you shouldn't be writing notes on notebook paper. You should be making notes. So like on this paper, while I was going over humanism, if you want to make a couple notes on this, that makes perfect sense to me, but no one should be writing on a blank sheet of paper their notes for this because we have so much stuff. Is everyone finding this, or am I a crazy person? We're finding it? Okay, good. These are the types. You got it, Alexis? Perfect. So, like, these are the things that, like, you should be looking for and using in order to make yourself better because no one is unprepared for this review. We've covered this content. I cannot stress that enough. Okay. So, I wanted to point out that for you to make sure you know that that existed. And then I also wanted to point out for today, because of course we just looked at the agenda, the weekly agenda. And today we are looking at, oh, I pulled out the wrong thing. I'm so sorry. I was distracted. I blame Emerson. I was talking to her. When we are talking about this week's stuff, one of the things I also gave you in that massive collection is the research crash course packet. It is a huge thing. This thing is amazing. If you haven't looked at it, it is awesome. And this is one of the things that I didn't want you to hand off to other people because I worked really hard on it and I don't want you just to hand it off. So like today when I'm going over research, ladies and gentlemen, yeah, this is how crazy I am. These are my notes, by the way. So in case you think I'm a crazy person, it's completely factual. I am a crazy person. Thank you so much for asking. But while we're doing our video lecture today, I would be writing notes on this. Do you see what I'm getting at here, people? Like, no one should be writing things on blank papers. We have all this stuff. Did everyone find their crash course? Research crash course? Okay. If you're not impressed by it, I hate you. Because I worked really, really hard on it, you turds. So it's pretty great. So just saying. So while we're going through the lecture today, this is what I would be looking at. And this is what I would be writing notes on and just going for clarification. If you have a question, these are the types of things I would be doing because this is what good students do. Okay, so I'm just trying to get you familiarized with what the expectations are kind of going forward. I just want to make sure you know that you do have resources, that you're not just sitting there. You can, of course, have your focus and your study guides out and making notes on that, but you also have really good resources that I handed you that you're more than welcome to use. Everyone good? Perfect. All right, so let's get to it then. All right. So Today we are covering research. So research, I will tell you, is something you're historically weak on as a collective. So with that being said, today is a very big day, and I guarantee that your exam is going to have 20% research. I'm guaranteeing you that your test on Wednesday is going to be about 24% research. Isn't that exciting? It's so exciting. Actually, that's a lie. It's probably 33%. Actually, it is 33%. I know that for a fact. So I know you're hearing me throw out numbers, so you know they're probably wrong, but like it's a lot. It's a lot of research. Emerson's like, yeah, there's no way those numbers match up. And you're right, Emerson. However, it will be a very big part of your test on Wednesday, and it's a huge part of your exam. There will be research even on your at-home test or whatever they're doing for you. So let's open it up and begin. Now, keep in mind, ladies and gentlemen, the reason why we're doing a Zoom meeting is so you can ask me questions. So at any time, you are more than welcome to ask me questions, because I can sit in my room and do this by myself and have no one around and get this done faster. But I wanted to be here with you. So if you have any questions throughout any of this, please, 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 please reach out. So any questions, concerns, comments at the moment? We're okay? Are we alive? Are we excited about a really dull weekend at home? Yes. I know, but it's really important that we all stay home. Can we agree? So please follow the rules. But I think we can all agree we're not looking forward to it. All right. So let's get this going so we can be done. All right. So research is what we're focusing on today, and it is a huge part of your test on maybe the 12th or whatever day they've decided. We'll figure that out on April 13th. So when we talk about research, what we're talking about is psychology and the scientific method. Keep in mind, with psychology now being a science, what is happening is we are looking for yesterday we talked about with structuralism, we started making psychology a actual science where we're doing research, we're collecting information, all those different types of things. With that being said, now we actually have to have the appropriate process in order to make that work. And how do we do that? We do it with the scientific method, which you've been studying since you were like in 3rd grade. So what is the scientific method? You have a hypothesis, you test that hypothesis, you see if it comes true. If it doesn't come true, then you go back and you kind of evaluate that data and to see if there's any bias or error in it. When we're talking about different types of experiments, this is where you're going to see a lot of your questions based on. So one of the major types of experiments is going to be naturalistic observation, and that's of course personified perfectly by Jane Goodall studying the gorillas. That is when you go to their habitat and you watch how they interact. So who can give me a real life example of naturalistic observation that we kind of use in psychology? Oh, I'll wait all day. I got time like that.
Oh, when you go into the lunchroom and you watch us socialize.
Perfect. Yes. So that was the example I used in class. Perfect, Rack. So if I wanted to see how Plant High School students used to socialize pre-corona, I would have gone into the lunchroom and watched you interact. It's perfect. So the good thing is, the positives about doing a naturalistic observation like Rex just described is that I get to see you in your natural habitat and how you actually kind of interact. However, there are major disadvantages, and these are key things that AP does care about, by the way. First one is observer effect. Okay, it's for people to behave differently. If Rex knew I was sitting and staring at him in the lunchroom, he's probably not going to say everything he wants to or do everything he wanted to. So observer effect is when you change your behavior because you know you're being watched. Then there's also observer bias. So like if I hate a kid, which there's a lot of kids at Plant I hate. Diana knows this because she sees me in the lunch line and she just knows when I immediately hate a kid. Okay, so there's kids I don't even know who I absolutely hate because of lunch. If I saw them and I just know how stupid they act in lunch line already, I'm going to already have a negative feeling about them. So that's observer bias, is when my expectation of them being complete clowns and morons is going to impact my observation of them. Now, when we have a naturalistic observation, we are dealing with the circumstances presented to us. So there's pros and there's cons. Then we have laboratory observation, and that is when we do an experiment in a controlled setting. That is the biggest thing. And if you're making a note about this, I would say a controlled setting by the experimenter. So it's about limiting as much stuff as possible. So the advantages of it is that it's a controlled environment. If we're testing, how, what would be an example of it? If we wanted to do a contest on what do people prefer, donuts or bagels? I'm a donuts person. I think, maybe not. It depends. I only like bagels if they're toasted. So if it's like room temperature bagels, I'm going to go donut all day. But if it's like toasted bagel, I'm going toasted. I'm just saying. If we were doing a laboratory observation about bagels and versus donuts, the advantages of it would be there would only be two options, bagels and donuts. And we would have a specific ability to limit what type of donuts, what type of bagels we would have, and we could force people to pick. The problem is how often do you walk into a white room with a double-sided mirror with an option between a donut and a bagel? Never. So are you going to put more thought into your decision if you pick a donut or a bagel? Yes. Is it going to be incredibly natural? No. And that's the problem with laboratory observation, is that people know that they're being watched and people don't necessarily behave in a normal way. And that's the biggest component. Another type of experiment that we do is called a case study. Now, a case study is done on very few people, and it cannot be extrapolated, which means we'll study one person, and that will allow us to ask questions, but it does not allow us to assume it's consistent amongst all people. And that is the biggest difference. Case studies allow us to ask more questions. It does not mean if it happened for this person, it happens for every single person. The most famous case study is going to be Phineas Gage. He's the guy who gets the railroad spike through his head. And because it goes through his frontal lobe and his personality completely changes, we believed after that case study that most of your personality is helmed in your frontal lobe. Now, have we done the research to kind of prove it? Yes. So the case study allows us to ask questions that can be researched later. A case study does not guarantee that something is actually factual because it happened to one person. It allows us to ask and then test those questions. All right. So another type of experiment that we do in psychology are surveys. I know this is very high level. If you don't understand what a survey is, it's okay. It's okay. A survey is when a researcher asks a bunch of questions. Wow. Now, when we talk about surveys, they're super popular because you can get a lot of information very quickly. However, surveys are tricky to do because of the population you have to deal with. You need to make sure that you have a representative population taking the survey. What does that mean? So if I wanted to figure out how Plant High School students are doing during this corona outbreak, this quarantine, if I just asked my kids, would I be getting a good representation of the whole school? Hello? No, absolutely not, because I only teach AP kids. So just looking at the population of Plant High School, that does not a representative population of Plant High School overall. And a lot of the challenges my kids are facing, other kids aren't facing. Some of the challenges other kids are facing, they're not facing mine. So if I wanted to make sure I was going to have a representative population, I would have to be pulling kids from like special ed. I'd have to be pulling kids from regular classes. I'd be pulling kids from honors classes, and I'd be pulling from other teachers to see how they're doing. That's what makes doing true surveys a little bit trickier. So the pros is that they're easy to do because you can just ask a lot of questions. Disadvantages, in order to make it meaningful, you have to do a representative sample, which means you have to go well out of your way to figure out who is in that population, who is not. And some people just don't answer them correctly. How many of you, raise your hand, and I'm already raising my hand, have just completely Christmas treed a scanned survey because you just did not give a shit and you didn't want to waste your time? Absolutely. So you skewed those people's results, people. How rude. All right. So any questions on the types of research methods, like how psychologists collect information? Thumbs up. Are we okay? No, I literally got like 2 people's thumbs up. Thank you so much, guys. Oh, aren't you fancy, Diana? All right. So when we're talking about these relationships, so the whole point of doing data collection is to find out relationships. Are things related? Do one thing cause something? How do these things vary? With that being said, when we're trying to find relationships in data, we're looking at correlation. Is there a relationship between the variables? Okay. And with those variables going forward, how does that look? What does that kind of feel like? So when we're talking about correlations, we're talking about correlational coefficients as well. And we're looking at the relationship between these. So in your notes, I know we did this 10,000 times, but I just happened to not have it available right at this second. So we talked about with correlational coefficients a lot in class, and it's probably on your focus in your study guide, but I want to make sure everyone's there. We talked about this over and over again. This type has a what type of correlation? Positive. So with a positive correlation, that means when one goes up, so does the other. Okay? So who can give me an example of a positive correlation scenario? Yes! The more of my quarantine snacks I eat, the happier I'll be. Absolutely. So the more food I eat, the happier I am. So when we have a line that goes like that, what is that? There you go. So that's positive, that's negative. So when one goes up, other down. Okay, so who can give me an example of a negative correlation little example? Good talk, guy. Guys, what's an example of... Yes! How relevant. Yes, absolutely. So the longer we're in quarantine, the less mentally stable we are. Absolutely. That is a perfect negative correlation. And then, of course, we have what here? No correlation, which means there's no sort of affiliation at all. Now, when we talk about correlation, you need to know that it ranges from -1 to +1. Okay? And the closer we get to -1, the stronger the correlation is to negative. The closer we get to positive, the stronger it gets to positive. Now, ladies and gentlemen, how often do we live in a world where things are super clearly, absolutely negative and super clearly positive? We don't. So in the middle, we have 0, of course, between -1 and +1. So if we have a correlation of negative 0.87, is that a positive or a negative correlation? There you go. So this will probably be on your AP exam. Even though you're doing a 45-minute exam, they love correlations for some reason, and they love talking about this shit. They love it. They love it. So if I had to guess, you're going to see it, which is why we're taking the time to sit here and kind of go through it. So you have a negative 0.87, and then you have a positive 0.85. Which one is stronger, ladies and gentlemen? Yes, there you go. So these are the things that they may ask you on the AP exam. Give an example of a positive or negative. Is this a positive negative correlation? It has this kind of value in comparison to this value. What type of things could it be? So thumbs up, thumbs down. We feel okay about correlation? Perfect, because I really do believe you're going to see it on your exam. Now, do I have any authority on that? Absolutely not. No one gives a crap what I think, but if I had to guess, that's what I would say. All right, so correlation, we feel pretty good. We feel pretty good about correlational coefficients, and then we're good to go. So what we just talked about, this positive correlation, negative correlation, but the biggest thing you really need to understand is that correlation does not improve causation. Just because the longer our quarantine goes on, the less mentally stable we are, doesn't mean they're 100% directed to each other. I think we could say there's a strong correlation, but it's not 100% because everyone has their own things. Oh, what type of Pop-Tart are we eating, Diana? Strawberry? Yes. All right. So we kind of went over that. So experiments, ladies and gentlemen, this is definitely somehow going to be on your test. I really do believe. All right, so when we talk about experiments, they are a deliberate manipulation of a variable to see if it changes behavior. Whenever we try to see if one thing has an effect, it's called an experiment. The operational definition of an experiment is what is being measured. That's a lie. Operational definition is the definition of the variable of interest. So if we're talking about in class, I really use the example of to see if you guys would steal candy from me. Do we remember that? I had an example of candy in the front, and that's the example I used to teach. Do we remember this? Yes? Okay. So for the operational definition of that experiment. So the experiment is stealing candy from Bennett. Okay? So when we're talking about that actual experiment, so I'm just pulling it up here so you can see what I'm doing. So the experiment is stealing candy from Bennett. So the operational definition are essentially the rules. So the rules are there's a bowl of candy in the front. And what type of candy is in the bowl. And of course your girl is going to give you good options like Snickers, M&Ms. Not like Airhead. Like I hate Airheads. Like any of those taffy candies are disgusting. And if you prefer them, you're strange. But that's the type of candy. So the operational definition is going to explain exactly what is the rules of the experiment and how things are going to be laid out. In that experiment, can you see my Elmo perfectly? Because I've moved it around on my screen. I'm just not sure what you can see versus what I can see. Can you see my Elmo stuff perfectly? Can you give me a thumbs up if you can see it perfectly? Okay. Okay, now can you see it better? Okay, perfect. So with that being said, we have operational definition, which is essentially the rules of the experiment and how it's going to be set up. Then we have the independent variable, and then we have a dependent variable. Independent variable is what the experimenter manipulates. Okay, so it's whatever the experimenter manipulates. So in this experiment, stealing candy from Bennett, what is the independent variable? Yeah, the candy. If I didn't put it in the front of the room, could you steal candy from me? No. So the independent variable is what the experimenter manipulates. So the dependent variable is the reaction to the independent variable. So what is the dependent variable of this experiment? There you go. Perfect. All right. Perfect. Done. So when we look at an experiment, we have to be able to understand what the operational definition is. Those are essentially just the rules of the experiment. The independent variable is what the experimenter is manipulating, and the dependent variable is the reaction. How are people responding to it? Okay? How we feel, okay? Because if you had to ask me, this is the hardest stuff about experiments. This, making sure you understand these three definitions and how they apply. Because they're going to ask. They are definitely going to ask. So I don't know much about what's going to be on that exam, but I will tell you that I really do believe it's going to be a bunch of research, because everyone has taught research at this point. So that's why I kept saying, and I will keep saying, that I think research is going to be a big deal. All right, so independent, dependent variable, we're feeling pretty comfortable with it. I'm glad. Other parts of experiments, you absolutely need to know those three things, but the next one is the experimental group and the control group. Now, in every experiment, you're supposed to have an experimental and a control group. Why do we have two groups when we're doing an experiment? Someone I haven't spoken to, there's 19 of you. Why do we have an experimental and a control group?
So the experimental group is where we're applying the variable and see what's being tested, while the control group is where we compare the two results.
Yeah, absolutely. And what was the experiment I used in class over and over again to teach this concept? Does anyone remember? Yeah, absolutely, Sophia. So when we talk about experimental and control groups, it's easier to think about it in a weight loss experiment. So if I told you that I had a drug that would help anyone lose up to 100 pounds easy, okay, I'd be a billionaire and I wouldn't have to be teaching anymore. However, I would give half of my population the drug. If you are receiving the drug, you're in the experimental group. And then half of my group, I would give them a placebo or a sugar pill to make them think that they're getting the pill, but they would be my control group. If my experimental group lost 10 pounds in the first week and my control group lost 1 pound in the first week, would we say that my pill is successful or unsuccessful? I'm looking for a reaction here, people. There we go. That's the point, is we are looking at a successful group. Now, if my experimental group loses 10 pounds in the first month and my control group loses 10 pounds in the first month, how are we doing? Good, bad, or completely neutral? Exactly. The drug does not work. That is the reason why we do experimental versus control groups. Because if we don't have the same expectation for people who are on the drug and people who are not on the drug, then we have no room to compare. Experimental and control groups are there for comparison. You need to make sure you understand that. Then we also have random assignment, means we randomly pick who gets to go in the experimental group and who gets to go in the control group. Easiest way to do it is by picking a name out of a hat and putting them in there. That's what AP would want you to know. When we talk about experiments, there's a lot of things as an experimenter that we need to adjust and to look out for. First thing is placebo effect. Placebo effect is when people who are in the control group who receive a placebo, which is straight up sugar, okay, they're just supposed to be thinking they're on the drug, so they continue to do the experiment, so we have that comparison group. People who believe they're getting better actually get better, and that's called the placebo effect, where the believing they're participating in an experiment will change their behavior. How do we kind of compensate for that? We have single blind studies where participants don't know if they're in the experimental group or the placebo group or the control group. Experimenter effect, we need to watch out that if I have a weight loss drug that could make me billions of dollars, do you think I'm going to be swayed to show amazingly incredible results? Yeah, because I want to be super wealthy. I want to buy my own island so I don't have to worry about coronavirus. Like that soccer player who did, I don't care, whatever, Cristiano, okay? He bought his own island, for God's sake. With that being said, experimenter bias could skew the results. And so we want to make sure that experimenters don't know who's getting the drug and who is not, which is why we do double-blind studies. We're trying to make sure that no one knows who is in each group, so that way no one can fudge the results. And then we have quasi-vote. That's fine. So in a real experiment, we have a hypothesis, we have a guess. Like for instance, in the experiment of would students steal candy from Bennett? My hypothesis is yes. Yes, you would steal candy from Bennett if you could. Independent variable would be the candy in the bowl in the front of the room. The dependent variable would be if you steal it. Experimental group, I would do it in both my AP Psych and AP World classes. All right. So when we are talking research, we really have to make sure we're following the common ethical guidelines of research. We just can't do whatever we want. Throughout the whole course of the year, I kept telling you that there are some experiments we can't replicate or we can't do again because they voided and went against these ethical guidelines. So, what are the ethical guidelines? The ethical guidelines are created by the American Psychological Association. They're the ones who follow it up here in the United States. Well, the first one you need to know is that rights and well-beings of participant must be weighed against the study's value to science. For instance, the Holocaust is a horrible chapter in human history, of course. One of the worst atrocities of the Holocaust is a lot of the experiments done on the Jews while they're inside these concentration camps. For one of the experiments that the Germans were doing on the Jews is that they were just inserting salt water into the flesh of the Jews to see the reaction. There was no reason to do that experiment. It caused tons of pain, caused death, caused serious health components. And they just wanted to know what would happen. That literally voids the rights and well-beings of participants must be weighed against the value. Okay? Participants must be allowed to make informed decisions about participation. We have to, even though there is some misleading when we do an experiment, we can't tell. There's a little bit of misdirection when we do experiments because if we laid everything out, then people would be making false decisions and not giving us insight. So there's a little bit of misconceptions that are allowed, but we can't lie outright and wholeheartedly to our participants. They have to have some information in order to make informed decisions. The deception must be justified. We can't just say, hey, we're going to do this. Like, we can't tell a mother that her child has just died because that reaction would be so severe and so emotional and cause such a physical, emotional distress that there's nothing that we can learn from that to justify it. So if we do cause some sort of stress, it has to be justified in the outcomes. Participants must be able to freely leave at any time, and that was one of the major ways that the Stanford Prison Experiment voided their ethical guidelines. I mean, they had a lot of ethical violations, but one of the biggest one is that Zimbardo never let them leave. He kept keeping them in, which is a huge problem. Participants must be protected from risks or told explicitly about risks. If an experiment is going to cause like high blood pressure because of a high stress situation, we need to tell people that this is going to happen ahead of time. We also need to debrief. So after the experiment, the participants must know the outcome of the experiment to make sure they understand what their role is and what research was found. And then finally, the data must be confidential. We can't just tell everyone what everyone scored. Everything must be personalized and hidden. For instance, if you're going to release the data collected from an experiment, you wouldn't use their real names. You could use pseudonyms, or you can turn their names into numbers. Everything must be confidential, and that is a huge problem for a lot of your information. All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's it for research. So that's it.
I have a question.
Sure. What do you got?
Are there different ethical guidelines if you're testing on animals?
Yes, they have a little bit less of a guidance. Yeah. I don't know what the difference is because no one's ever asked me, and I've never really looked because I don't do research on animals. So I don't know exactly what that difference is, but yes, they have a little bit of a difference. Something I do want to point out to you guys, and I forgot to mention at the beginning of this meeting. So on Monday, I have a doctor's appointment at 8 a.m., which obviously I have plenty of time to come talk to you, but I have to move my AP World meeting a half an hour, so I'm going to push you guys back to 11:30 on Monday, only for Monday, just because I have a doctor's appointment, because, your girl's 8.5 months pregnant. So with that being said, on Monday, we're going to meet at 11:30, not at 11. And then Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, we'll be back at 11. Keep in mind, you're not required to be at these meetings. There's no attendance being taken or anything like that. I'll, of course, record my 11:30 meeting. If you can't make it, that's perfectly fine. But I just wanted to let you know that I am pushing our meeting back to 11:30 just because I have to push back AP World. And they suck. So that's it for today. Do you have any questions or anything like that? Research is a lot. We're okay?
Do we have to know central tendency and
I would be familiar with it. I really don't think standard deviation is going to be on your test, but those centralizing, what was the first thing you said, Rex?
learn how to calculate central tendency?
Yeah, I mean, that's just like your average, your mode, median, mode, and stuff like that. I believe there is going to be a question on your test on Wednesday on it. But that's like your average and stuff like that. If you look at your focus and your study guide from that week, from week 2, it'll all be on there as well. So keep in mind.
Yeah, I'm just saying it because we skipped that question
On the focus. Okay, yeah, that's like your central median is your median mode focus, mean, median, mode, all of that stuff. Yes, my darling. Mm-hmm. It's up to you. I mean, it's up to you. You also have my packet that we talked about at the very beginning that covers it as well and stuff like that. I mean, if
The packet's enough. It's just that stuff's on the focus and study guide.
Yeah, I mean, because keep in mind, I mean, I just went through this in 25 minutes. We spent a whole week on it. So, I mean, that's just the difference between it. But I wouldn't stress yourself out that much about it, Kate. But best practice, as long as you have that packet and you're listening and you're kind of thinking along with it, you should be perfectly fine. Because they can't ask you everything because you only have 45 minutes, and I doubt they're really going to ask you those types of questions. Especially with the format of how things are going right now, because everything's a disaster. I mean, things are going so smoothly around the whole world. Yay! All right, what else can I answer for you, my darlings?
So for the FRQs, if we only have 45 minutes, how many are we going to take?
Girl, I have no idea. I won't know until April 3rd. So I would love to be able to tell you a definitive answer. I don't know because they haven't released that information. As soon as I know, you will know, and I promise, promise, promise. How are the other AP Psych classes doing? Have you talked to anyone? What are they doing? What do you...
Haven't started.
Oh.
Apparently, all 3 of the teachers had a meeting together.
Oh. Oh, I wasn't invited. Huh.
They didn't even send it.
Hey, girl, I do me. I do me. I live my life for me. So here we are. So I would also like it noted that, fine, they're having a meeting, but who's done with content? Yes. So, all right. Well, I will tell you, I've gotten about 30 emails from kids who are not in my AP Psych class about joining my AP Psych class. So, anyway. Alrighty. Huh?
Are you gonna let them?
Sophia.
It's not fair. We've been working so hard.
I know.
Miss Bennett. Sorry.
It's my bonus. I know it's my bonus. So I have a couple kids from AP World who, if you've survived me in AP World, you know I have a soft spot. So Sophia, don't be such a hater. But if they had me in AP World and I know how hard they work, then of course I'll let them in. Don't be so cranky, Sophia. I see you.
I'm not cranky. I get like yeah, if they're in AP world, like it makes sense. But I don't want like loafers come over here and be like, oh, my teacher sucks.
Well, at the end of the day, we aren't freaking out because we've already done the work. And hopefully you see with our review style, we're depending on the work we've already done. Can we agree? So it's not like we're not panicking. We're covering stuff, we're reviewing stuff. We're not panicking because we've done the work all year, and that's the benefit to doing the work all year. So I got some really panicky 30 emails from kids who aren't in my class. And, you know, they're like, I don't know any of this stuff. And that's not a problem we have because we've been doing the work, and that's a huge deal. So moving forward, with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, I want you to have a wonderful weekend. You do have a vocab quiz that's due by midnight tonight. You also have a Barron's book that you should be working on. That's really your only consistent homework over the weekend. If you do not work on your Barron's book, you will drown. Ask Rex. He has lots of personal experience from not waiting to the last minute. So don't do it. And yeah, so make sure you're working on your Barron's book. You have a vocab quiz today. And please follow the CDC guidelines and stay home. Please. Let's defeat this. Please. Don't be idiots. Alrighty. Bye, guys. Have a great day. Enjoy your quarantine. Bye.